The stable smelled of rot and regret, its splintered beams groaning under the weight of a Vermont winter. Ezra Cole, 27 and stubborn as the frost clinging to the windows, stood in the doorway, staring at the wreckage his grandfather left him. Nobody in Ashwood thought he'd make anything of it in a body but Leo Alvarez, who watched him now with eyes that held too much faith for one heart to carry. Ezra's boots crunched on the frozen dirt as he stepped inside, the journal in his hand heavier than the sagging roof above. His grandfather's scrawled words, "Build something true," burned in his mind, a promise he didn't know how to keep. The townsfolk called it a fool's inheritance, a crumbling stable on a patch of land too stubborn to yield anything but weeds. They laughed when Ezra, the quiet kid who'd fled Ashwood at 18, returned to claim it. They laughed harder when they learned he was gay, as if that somehow made the stable's decay his fault. Leo, a carpenter who'd wandered into town 6 months ago, didn't laugh. He leaned against a post now, his flannel shirt dusted with sawdust, his dark eyes tracing Ezra's silhouette. "You're gonna fix this place up. Easy," he said, voice low and sure. "I can feel it." Ezra snorted, kicking a rusted nail across the floor. "Feelings don't fix roofs, Leo." But his heart tripped at the way Leo's smile tilted, like he knew something Ezra didn't. Ashwood was a small town, the kind where gossip was currency and outsiders were suspect. Ezra had grown up dodging whispers about his soft hands and city dreams. When he left for Boston at 18, he swore he'd never come back. But his grandfather's death and the unexpected will naming him heir to this broken stable had pulled him home. The journal, tucked in a drawer with the deed, was the real mystery. Pages of cryptic notes, sketches of horses that never existed, and that one line, "Build something true." Ezra didn't know what it meant, but it felt like a dare. Leo, with his easy grin and calloused hands, had shown up in Ashwood looking for work. He'd stayed at the local inn, charming the owner with stories of his travels New Mexico, Oregon, a stint in New Orleans. He was everything Ezra wasn't, grounded, warm, unapologetically himself. When they met at the hardware store, Leo buying nails and Ezra staring blankly at paint cans, something clicked. Leo offered to help with the stable, and Ezra, against his better judgment, said yes. Now, as the January wind howled outside, Ezra flipped open the journal. Grandpa thought this place could be something. He muttered. "A sanctuary," he called it. "For what? I don't know." Leo stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold. "Maybe for you. Maybe for us." Ezra's chest tightened. Us. The word hung between them, fragile as the stable's rafters. He'd felt it growing, this pull toward Leo, but Ashwood wasn't kind to men like them. The laughter, the side-eye glances, the preacher's sermons about family values still stung. Yet Leo's presence was a warmth Ezra couldn't ignore. They started small. Leo hauled lumber from the mill, teaching Ezra how to measure and cut. Ezra, who'd spent years in a cubicle, felt alive swinging a hammer, even when his hands blistered. They worked late, their breath clouding in the lantern light, sharing stories of their pasts. Ezra talked about Boston, the freedom of anonymity, the ache of never fitting in. Leo spoke of his family in Albuquerque, how they'd embraced him when he came out at 16, but how he'd left to find his own path. One night, as they sanded a beam, Leo's hand brushed Ezra's. Neither pulled away. "You ever think about staying?" Leo asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ezra froze. Staying meant facing Ashwood's judgment. Staying meant admitting he wanted Leo, not just as a friend. "I don't know if I can," he said finally, eyes on the floor. Leo didn't push. He never did. But the next day, He carved their initials C plus L A into a post, grinning like it was a secret only they shared. The stable began to change. They replaced rotted boards, patched the roof, and painted the walls a soft gray. Ezra found sketches in the journal plans for stalls, a loft, even a garden. His grandfather's vision started to take shape, and with it, Ezra's resolve. He wasn't just rebuilding a stable, he was rebuilding himself. But Ashwood noticed. The laughter turned to murmurs. "What's he doing out there?" they'd say at the diner. "Two guys alone in that stable. Ain't right." Ezra overheard it all, each word a needle under his skin. Leo, though, seemed unbothered. "Let him talk," he'd say, hammering a nail with extra force. "They'll see." What they saw was progress. By spring, the stable stood taller, its new roof gleaming under the sun. Ezra and Leo planted wildflowers along the path, their colors defiant against the town's gray skepticism. And in the quiet moments, when the work was done and they sat on the porch, Leo's hand would find Ezra's, their fingers intertwining like roots taking hold. Spring brought warmth, but Ashwood's chill lingered. Ezra and Leo's stable was no longer a joke, but the town's whispers grew sharper, like knives honed by suspicion. Ezra felt them every time he drove into town for supplies, eyes boring into him at the gas station, the grocery store, the post office. He tried to ignore it, focusing on the stable. The journal's sketches guided the intricate plans for a community space, not just a barn. Ezra's grandfather had written about a place for those who don't belong, and Ezra felt the weight of that dream. He and Leo worked tirelessly, adding a loft for gatherings, benches for the garden, even a small stage for music. The stable was becoming a sanctuary, just as the journal promised. Leo was the heart of it. His laugh echoed as he taught Ezra to use a lathe, his hands steadying Ezra's when the wood spun too fast. At night, they'd collapse on the stable's new floor, sharing a thermos of coffee, their shoulders brushing. Ezra wanted to say something to name the ache in his chest, but fear kept him silent. Ashwood wasn't ready for them, and he wasn't sure he was either. One morning, a truck pulled up, its driver a wiry man named Caleb, who ran the local feed store. He'd never been friendly, but today his face was hard. "Heard you're turning that place into some kind of club," he said, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "Folks don't like it." Ezra's stomach twisted. "It's just a stable, Caleb. We're fixing it up." Caleb's eyes flicked to Leo, who was hauling a plank nearby. "Fixing it up for what? You two ain't fooling nobody." Leo set the plank down, his jaw tight. "We're building something good here. You got a problem? Say it plain." Caleb sneered but drove off without another word. The encounter left Ezra shaken. He'd known Ashwood's prejudice, but hearing it so blunt was different. That night, he couldn't sleep, the journal open on his lap. His grandfather's words, "Truth is worth the fight," felt like a challenge he wasn't sure he could meet. Leo noticed. He always did. The next day, he dragged Ezra to the nearby lake, insisting they take a break. They swam in the cold water, laughing like kids, and for a moment, Ezra forgot the town's judgment. As they dried off on the shore, Leo's hand found his, and this time, Ezra didn't pull away. "We're stronger than them," Leo said, his voice fierce. "This stable's ours. They can't take that." Ezra wanted to believe him. Back at the stable, they kept working, but the tension grew. Someone slashed their tires one night, leaving a note, "Leave." Ezra's hands shook as he read it, but Leo burned it in the fire pit, his face unreadable. "They're scared," he said. "Scared of what we're building." What they were building wasn't just the stable. It was trust, a life, a love neither had spoken aloud. Ezra felt it in the way Leo's eyes lingered, in the quiet moments when their hands brushed. But fear clung to him, fear of the town, of losing Leo, of failing his grandfather's dream. Then came the festival. Ashwood's annual spring fair was a big deal, and Ezra and Leo decided to open the stable for a small event, a test run for their sanctuary. They invited a few locals, mostly artists and musicians Leo had befriended. The stable glowed with string lights, the garden blooming with color. A guitarist played soft folk tunes, and for a few hours, it felt like they'd won. Until they didn't. Halfway through, a group of men, Caleb among them, showed up, drunk and loud. "This what you call a sanctuary?" Caleb slurred, kicking a bench. "For freaks." Ezra froze, but Leo stepped forward, his voice calm but steel-edged. "Get out, Caleb. This isn't your place." The men laughed, but something in Leo's stance, unyielding, fearless, made them back off. They left, but the damage was done. The guests whispered, some leaving early. Ezra felt the stable's walls closing in, his grandfather's dream slipping away. That night, Leo found him in the loft, staring at the journal. "We can't stop," Leo said, sitting close. "This place, it's bigger than them. It's bigger than us." Ezra's voice broke. "What if they're right? What if this is a mistake?" Leo took his hand, his grip firm. "You're not a mistake. We're not a mistake." Ezra's breath caught. He wanted to kiss Leo, to let the world fall away, but the weight of Ashwood's hate held him back. Instead, he leaned into Leo's shoulder, and they sat in silence, the journal open between them. Summer burned through Ashwood, and the stable stood proud, its gray walls a quiet rebellion against the town's scorn. Ezra and Leo pushed forward, turning the stable into a haven for misfits, artists, dreamers, kids who didn't fit Ashwood's mold. They hosted open mic nights, art workshops, even a book club. Each event drew a small crowd, mostly outsiders, but it was enough to keep the dream alive. Ezra's heart, though, was a battlefield. Every laugh from Leo, every touch, pulled him closer to a truth he couldn't name. He loved Leo, loved him in a way that scared him breathless, but saying it felt like inviting ruin. Ashwood's whispers had turned to threats, graffiti on the stable's walls, broken windows, anonymous letters. Ezra kept them from Leo, hiding the hate to protect him, but it ate at him. One sweltering July day, a stranger arrived. Marissa, a journalist from Burlington, had heard about the stable through a friend. She was writing a piece on rural community spaces and wanted to feature them. Ezra was wary publicity could bring more trouble, but Leo saw opportunity. "Let her tell our story," he said, his eyes bright. "Let the world see what we're doing." Marissa spent a week with them, her camera clicking as they worked. She interviewed Ezra about his grandfather's journal, Leo about his carpentry, and the locals who'd started to come around, people like Sarah, a painter who'd found a home in the stable's art nights. Marissa's questions were gentle but sharp, and when she asked about their relationship, Ezra stumbled. "We're partners," he said, the word feeling too small for what they were. Leo just smiled, his hand brushing Ezra's under the table. "We're building something together," he said, and Marissa's pen paused, her eyes softening. The article came out in August, a glowing spread in a regional magazine. It called the stable a beacon of hope and praised Ezra and Leo's courage. For a moment, it felt like victory. Emails poured in, people from nearby towns wanting to visit, to help, to belong. But Ashwood's reaction was colder. The diner buzzed with resentment, and Caleb's crew grew bolder. One night, They set fire to the garden. The wildflowers reduced to ash. Ezra stood in the charred remains, his hands shaking. Leo was already raking the soil, planning to replant. "We'll make it better," he said, but Ezra couldn't meet his eyes. The journal, now dog-eared and worn, felt like a lie. Build something true. How? When the world kept burning it down. That night, Leo found him in the loft, tears streaking his face. "I can't do this," Ezra whispered. "They'll never let us be." Leo knelt before him, his hands on Ezra's knees. "They don't get to decide who we are," he said, his voice fierce. "I love you, Ezra. I've loved you since that first day in the hardware store." Ezra's heart stopped. The words he'd feared, craved, needed, they were real now, undeniable. He pulled Leo close, their foreheads touching, and for the first time, he let himself believe they could be enough. But the world wasn't done testing them. The next week, a petition circulated, demanding the stable be shut down for disturbing the peace. It had dozens of signatures, Caleb's at the top. Ezra felt the walls closing in, but Leo was unshaken. "We fight," he said. "We show them what this place means." They organized a rally, inviting everyone who'd ever set foot in the stable. Marissa spread the word, and by September, cars lined the dirt road. People came, queer kids from Burlington, artists from Montpelier, even a few Ashwood locals who'd softened over time. They held signs, love builds, sanctuary stands. Leo spoke, his voice carrying over the crowd, telling the story of two men who'd found home in each other in a broken stable. Ezra watched, his heart swelling. For the first time, he felt like he belonged not just to Leo, but to this fight, this dream. The petition failed, the town council backing down under public pressure. The stable stood, stronger than ever. But love, like wood, needs care to endure. Ezra still struggled to say the words Leo deserved. Every time he tried, fear choked him, fear of losing this, of Ashwood's hate winning. Leo never pushed, but Ezra saw the question in his eyes, the quiet hope waiting for an answer. Fall painted Ashwood in crimson and gold, but the stable was the true masterpiece. Ezra and Leo had turned it into a thriving hub, weekly events, workshops, even a youth group for queer teens. The journal's vision was alive, its pages now filled with Ezra's own notes, ideas for expansion, dreams of a bigger sanctuary. But the weight of love, unspoken, hung heavy. Leo was patient, but Ezra saw the strain. Late nights, when they sat in the loft, Leo's hand would linger, waiting for Ezra to bridge the gap. "I'm here," Leo said once, his voice soft. "Whenever you're ready." Ezra wanted to be ready. He'd faced Ashwood's hate, rebuilt a stable, built a life, but saying, "I love you," felt like the final wall he couldn't climb. He'd grown up hiding, shrinking himself to fit a town that didn't want him. Leo deserved more than half a heart. The threats didn't stop. Graffiti reappeared, uglier now, slurs scrawled in red paint. Ezra scrubbed them off before Leo could see, but the anger festered. One night, he found a brick through the stable's window, a note tied to it, "You're not welcome." He burned it, like Leo had burned the last, but the fire in him was fading. Marissa's article had spread beyond Vermont. A national outlet picked it up, and suddenly, the stable was news. Reporters called, wanting interviews. Ezra panicked. More attention meant more risk, but Leo saw a chance. "Let's show them who we are," he said. "Not just us, the whole community." They agreed to a feature with a major magazine. The reporter, a kind woman named Priya, spent days at the stable, capturing its spirit. Her article, published in October, was a love letter to the sanctuary and to Ezra and Leo. It called them the heart of a movement, their bond a quiet defiance against hate. The story went viral, shared across social media, drawing support from strangers worldwide. But with visibility came backlash. Caleb and his crew rallied, their rhetoric louder, uglier. They picketed the stable, shouting slurs, scaring off visitors. Ezra felt the dream slipping again, but Leo was a rock. "They're loud because they're losing," he said, his hand squeezing Ezra's. "We've got the world on our side now." The world. Maybe, but not Ashwood. The town council called a meeting, pressured by Caleb's group to address community concerns. Ezra and Leo attended, standing together as residents aired their grievances. "It's unnatural," one woman said. "They're influencing our kids." Ezra's hands shook, but Leo's voice was steady. "We're building a place for everyone," he said. "If that scares you, that's your burden, not ours." The council ruled in their favor, citing no legal grounds to shut the stable down. The crowd booed, but Ezra felt a spark of hope. They were winning not just battles, but hearts. Sarah, the painter, spoke up, saying the stable had saved her from loneliness. A teenager, Jamie, said it was the only place he felt safe. Even a few locals nodded, their faces softening. That night, Ezra found Leo in the garden, replanting wildflowers. The air was crisp, the stars bright. "You were incredible today," Ezra said, his voice thick. Leo looked up, his eyes searching. "I'd fight for you forever. Easy. You know that, right?" Ezra's throat closed. He wanted to say it, to let the words spill, but they caught, tangled in years of fear. Instead, he kissed Leo hard, desperate, like it could say what he couldn't. Leo kissed him back, and for a moment, the world was just them, the stable, the stars. But love needs words, and Ezra's silence was a weight. He knew Leo felt it, the unspoken promise hanging between them. As winter loomed, Ezra vowed to find the courage not just for Leo, but for himself, for the sanctuary they'd built against all odds. Winter returned, blanketing Ashwood in snow, but the stable glowed with warmth. String lights lined the rafters, and a wood stove crackled during events. Ezra and Leo had made it a true sanctuary, a place where people found belonging. But Ezra's heart was still a locked door, and Leo's patience, though endless, showed cracks. The viral article brought allies. Donations poured in money for repairs, supplies, even a scholarship fund for queer youth. Volunteers arrived, helping with events, painting murals, planting trees. The stable was no longer just Ezra and Leo's. It was a community's. But the hate didn't vanish. Caleb's group grew quieter, but their glares lingered, and small acts of vandalism smashed lights. Stolen signs kept Ezra on edge. He hid it from Leo, but the strain showed. He was short-tempered, distracted, his nights spent poring over the journal instead of talking. Leo noticed, his smiles rarer, his touches tentative. One night, as they closed up after a poetry reading, Leo broke the silence. "Easy. What's going on? You're here, but you're not." Ezra stared at the floor, the journal in his hands. "I'm trying," he said. I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" Leo's voice was soft, but there was an edge, a plea. "Love you," Ezra whispered. "Not the way you deserve." Leo's breath hitched. He stepped closer, his hands framing Ezra's face. "You don't have to be perfect. Just be you. That's enough." Ezra wanted to believe it, but the fear was a tide, pulling him under. He kissed Leo, hoping it could bridge the gap, but it wasn't enough. Love needed truth, and Ezra's was still buried. The turning point came in January. A national queer rights organization contacted them, inspired by Priya's article. They wanted to host a gala at the stable, a fundraiser for LGBTQ+ youth. It was a chance to put the stable on the map, to show Ashwood and the world what they'd built. Ezra hesitated, fearing more backlash, but Leo was all in. "This is it. Easy," he said. "This is what your grandfather meant." They threw themselves into planning. The stable transformed white tablecloths, fairy lights, a stage for speeches. Invitations went out to activists, donors, even celebrities. Marissa and Priya helped with PR, and soon, the event was trending online. Ashwood Sanctuary became a hashtag, shared by thousands. The gala was a triumph. Hundreds filled the stable, their laughter drowning out the ghosts of Ashwood's hate. A trans teen from Burlington spoke about finding hope at the stable. A drag queen from New York performed, dedicating it to Ezra and Leo. For one night, the world felt right. But after, as they cleaned up, Ezra found Leo outside, staring at the stars. "You were quiet tonight," Leo said. "Even with all this." Ezra's chest ached. He wanted to say I love you, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he said, "I'm scared I'll ruin this. Ruin us." Leo turned, his eyes wet. "You won't. But you have to let me in." Ezra nodded, but the silence between them grew. He knew he had to change, to speak his truth, or risk losing the man who'd made the stable and his heart whole. Spring returned, and with it, a reckoning. The stable was thriving, a beacon for those who needed it. But Ezra's silence was a crack in its foundation. Leo poured himself into the sanctuary, organizing events, mentoring kids, but his eyes held a quiet hurt. Ezra saw it, felt it, and hated himself for it. He turned to the journal, reading his grandfather's words until they blurred. Build something true. He'd built the stable, but not the courage to be true to Leo. Every day, he tried to say I love you, but the fear was a chain, forged in Ashwood's judgment and his own doubts. The breaking point came in April. A queer youth group from Boston visited, and one kid, a shy 15-year-old named Riley, asked to talk to Ezra alone. In the loft, Riley confessed he was scared to come out, terrified of losing his family. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How do you live like this?" Ezra's throat tightened. He wanted to say something wise, but all he could think of was Leo, who loved fearlessly, who'd faced Ashwood's hate and never flinched. "You find someone who makes it worth it," he said finally. "Someone who sees you." Riley nodded, tears in his eyes, and Ezra felt like a fraud. He was telling this kid to be brave when he couldn't be. That night, he found Leo in the garden, planting new wildflowers. The air was soft, the stable glowing behind them. Ezra's heart pounded. He couldn't lose Leo. "Leo," he said, his voice shaking. "I love you. I've loved you every day, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." Leo froze, his eyes wide. Then he laughed, a sound of pure relief, and pulled Ezra into his arms. "Took you long enough," he whispered, kissing him fiercely. The world fell away, and for the first time, Ezra felt free. They were unstoppable after that. The stable grew, drawing more visitors, more support. Ashwood's hate didn't vanish, but it faded, drowned out by the community they'd built. Ezra proposed in May, in the loft where they'd shared so many nights. He didn't have a ring, just the journal, open to a blank page where he'd written, "Marry me." Leo said yes, tears streaming, and they laughed until dawn. The wedding was set for June, in the stable's garden. They planned it together, every detail a testament to their love. Invitations went out, and the world responded. Marissa and Priya spread the word, and soon, Ashwood wedding was trending. People sent gifts, letters, love from across the globe. But Caleb's crew wasn't done. The night before the wedding, they trashed the garden, tearing up flowers, smashing lanterns. Ezra and Leo found it at dawn, their hearts sinking. But the community rallied. By noon, volunteers had restored the garden, better than before. Sarah painted a mural on the stable's walla heart with their initials. Riley and the youth group hung new lights. Ashwood showed up, not all, but enough. The wedding day dawned bright, the stable a vision of love. Wildflowers bloomed, lights twinkled, and the air hummed with anticipation. Ezra and Leo stood in the garden, surrounded by friends, allies, strangers who'd become family. The journal lay on a table, open to its final page. We built something true. The ceremony was simple, raw, real. Ezra's vows were a promise to be brave, to love Leo without fear. Leo's were a vow to build, always, together. When they kissed, the crowd cheered, and for a moment, Ashwood's hate was a distant memory. The world watched. Marissa and Priya's coverage went viral. The story of two men and a stable capturing hearts globally. Ashwood wedding trended for days. Headlines praising their courage, their love, their sanctuary. Even some Ashwood locals attended, their faces soft with something like regret. Caleb and his crew stayed away, their voices drowned out by a world that had moved on. The stable stood as a testament not just to Ezra and Leo, but to everyone who'd found home there. Riley, now out to his family, helped lead youth groups. Sarah's murals covered the walls. The sanctuary thrived, a beacon of hope. Ezra and Leo stayed, building a life in the stable they'd made their own. The journal, now filled with their story, sat on a shelf, a reminder of a dream fulfilled. They'd faced hate, fear, doubt, and one not just for themselves, but for everyone who needed a place to belong. Years later, when they looked back, it wasn't the headlines that mattered. It was the quiet moments, the nights in the loft, the mornings in the garden, the way Leo's hand fit in Ezra's. They'd built something true, and it was enough.